So 2025 is all about promise and some broken promises. We're going to talk about that more on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petry.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 240 of the Geek Watch podcast. And I'm Brian Hatcher. Today, Mandy was not able to come to the podcast. She's not been feeling very well. So in her place today, we bring to the podcast, friend of the podcast, Kevin Pauley.
Happy to be here. I'm not as pretty as Mandy, but I do have better hair. So, we'll have to just deal with that.
Where do you keep it?
Parts unknown. Parts unknown.
Well, that's one way of phrasing it. But we are going to refer to you as Kevin today and not use your full name, which is, of course, his friend of the podcast, Kevin Pauley.
Yes, that is my full name. It's on a business card.
I did want to talk a little bit today. We did talk a little bit about the Oscars last week, but I did want to get your take on some of it. I'm sure you've been keeping up with a lot of that.
Yeah. The biggest shock for me, honestly, was the shutout of Villeneuve for Best Director for Dune Part 2, because I really thought they would kind of treat him like they did Peter Jackson with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, that if he stuck the landing with Part 2, that's where he'd get potentially the win. That really shocked me that he's not even in the nomination, because Dune 2, critically successful. I mean, it's up for Best Picture and Best Cinematography, as it should be, because that's a stunning film. But it's like huge moneymaker, huge with the crowds, and Villeneuve gets completely knocked out. I was absolutely floored by that. I was so happy to see The Substance get the nomination, and for not only for Best Director but for Best Picture, because it's been a tick since a horror film
Right.
has had that kind of clout. And I think, I have not even had a chance to see The Substance, but from everything I've seen about it, it's right up my alley. But I mean, everything I've heard about it has been great. I was really thrilled for Demi Moore to get the nod for Best Actress. Very surprised, though, that her co-star is not up for Best Supporting Actress. That really shocked me there. The dark horse candidate I wanted to see happen, but did not, was Pamela Anderson for The Last Showgirl. I was really, really hoping that somehow, some way, she might sneak up in there. But overall, the only real shocker is the Netflix film that got the most nominations, and I can't think of the name of it because I've not seen it.
Emily.
Perez or something.
Emily
So
Perez.
that's the one that it is nominated for everything, and I'm just like, there are things it's nominated for that having seen what I've seen of the film, I'm like, why is it in that category? There are other things that could have been in that category that didn't get all the love. So it feels like the Oscars want to give this film everything, which is interesting, but I don't know. For me, there are a lot of usual suspects I expected to be in there. Wicked, Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, no shocks there. Again, Dune for Best Cinematography, no shock there. The Best Animated category, I thought, was really maybe the best nominations of the whole thing. There's a lot of good stuff there, and that really could kind of go any which way. I'm very excited to see which film takes the category there. This is one of those years where I didn't get to see as many films because we had a baby. So
Yeah.
that kind of takes you out of the running for a lot of films. But to me, I feel like it's Emily Perez's year to lose. I don't think Wicked gets any of the big stuff this year. I think, once again, they'll treat it like Lord of the Rings. If Part 2 sticks to landing next year, that's where they get the awards. Now, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande both deserve to be nominated. No qualms about that. I would have no problem if they won, but I just feel like it's going to take Part 2 for them to cement those wins. That's my thing.
I will say, I do think that, although I don't believe Cynthia Erivo will get it this year, but she may wind up getting nominated next year.
Yep.
Although definitely deserves it.
Oh, absolutely.
I just feel like you say, and we talked about this last week, is that because it is two films,
Yes.
that they may look at, well, there's some people we don't want to knock out. I can see possibly Demi getting that.
Demi is the one I would be really thrilled if she pulled it off, especially for a film like The Substance. That would be super cool to see that happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like she's paid her dues. She's been, a consistent star, since way back when. I just feel like this could be the year that Hollywood recognizes her for the work, and then next year Cynthia Erivo will get the Oscar for Wicked. That's what I think could happen. I'm not saying it's what will happen, but I feel like there's a strong potential for that to happen.
Well, yeah, and especially because knowing the musical like I do, part 2 is going to be even like more emotional.
Oh, sure.
So I can definitely see that. Although it wouldn't surprise me if Ariana Grande doesn't get the nod this year.
Well, she's been nominated, but I don't know if she'll get the win yet. Again, I feel like it's going to be that two-picture thing because she's really great in the part, no doubt about it. But I just feel like, just looking at the way they've treated these kinds of things in the past, part 2 is where they'll stick the landing. If it is successful and it does its job, which I'm sure that it will, that's where they're going to get everything.
Yeah, and I do see that point. The only reason why I'm kind of leaning to seeing possibly Ariana Grande winning it this year is because, in a real sense, it's not a supporting actress role. It's
very much a co-star role. I agree.
Yeah,
they had to pick one for the other. Basically,
exactly.
One has to be actress, one has to be supporting actress.
Because
but yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but in the musical, when it was up for the Tony, of course, you had your 2 leads get nominated for the award for the lead, and of course they both couldn't get it, so it went to one. So they wound up splitting it that way. So because of the fact that it is a more substantial role, and nothing against the other actresses in the category,
Nope.
I didn't see anything that I considered like a huge standout that could be that competitive.
I'd need to see the list in front of me to be able to tell you exactly how I felt. I know I was really excited that Isabella Rossellini got nominated for Conclave because and again, she's one of those names. She's been in the game for so long, very respected actress. I wouldn't be shocked for her to come away with Hardware because, again, not saying that she's not deserving it for Conclave, but there are sometimes, as you know, they give Oscars for like careers for this one picture, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I could totally see that kind of happening as well for her.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as well. And a lot of people are saying that Ray Fiennes is
I would love to see Ray Fiennes win because he's never gotten the award, and well, I take it back. Maybe he won for The English Patient. I can't remember, but he should have gotten it for Schindler's List. Period. Full stop. And he didn't. And so for me to be able to see him get, Best Actor would be fantastic. He is one of my favorite actors. Just one of those actors that everything he's in is better because he's in it. He's just one of those guys that just every choice he makes is right. I can't explain it. He just is that good. So I would be totally thrilled if he walked away with it. But again, this is one of those years where the tide seems like it's favoring Emilia Pérez, but it could be one of those things that by the time they get to voting, things get crossed, things cancel each other out, and maybe it doesn't take all the hardware that a lot of people think it will.
Well, the thing with Emilia Pérez, what I find interesting about this movie is that, like you say, it got a lot of...
The most of any film this year. 14. Some of the most ever in history for a film. I mean, that's gigantic.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that most of the talk that I hear about this movie is how bad it is.
Yeah, I've not watched it. Honestly, it flew under the radar for me. So when it started getting all this award talk, I'm like, what is this film? So I felt bad because I'm like, I have no idea what this movie is. It's got a great cast and everything, but I'm with you. I've not heard anybody talking about this is one of the greatest movies ever made. It's just like all of a sudden, it feels like the Oscars want it to be the best movie of the year, but nobody else does. Because that's one thing I've been checking out on YouTube is like, people responding to the award nominations, and almost everybody is like, why is this film getting all these awards? This is a bad call. A lot of people are comparing it to like Crash and those films that like shouldn't have won. The Green Book, like people are like, these movies were not good. They should not have won. And it feels like a lot of people are on that side of the fence with this movie's nominations.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I've heard mostly online about this movie is it involves a character who's transgender, and the movie is about this transgender person, although she's not the lead character. It's basically someone who's learning about transgenderism.
Okay.
The Zoe Saldana role. She's the main. And, and there's singing in it.
Okay.
Which is...
Okay, so it's kind of a musical.
Yeah, kind of a musical.
And a song's nominated for Best Song. I remember just like, wow, like that's crazy.
Yeah. What I find shocking about this movie is how many transgender people talk about how much they hate this movie.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is, did they actually cast a transgender person to play the transgender role?
Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know.
Because I know that would be a big, bone of contention. That's
Well,
for sure.
the big bone of contention with this movie is the portrayal of transgenderism they hate.
Oh, yeah. That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Specifically, this idea that being transgender means that you're wanting surgery, that you have to have the surgery.
Yeah.
One of the songs is all about all the different kinds of surgery you wind up getting if you're transgender, or you could get. And it's a musical number.
Yeah, that's
of people on operating tables, being spun around and all of this.
That's that feels like a Mel Brooks number.
Yeah,
that feels like a Springtime for Hitler moment. Eek.
Well, for a lot of transgender people who are like, look, surgery is a possibility, but no, it's not necessary.
It's not everybody's going to have it. No,
exactly. And so they feel like it's, especially for people who do not understand what
right. It almost
transgender
feels
is.
like they're trying to say the surgery is what makes you trans. No, that's not. It's
Yes.
not. That's not the defining point of that at all. That's silly to say it. That
And
way.
so they feel like it, for them, it represents transgenderism in a really bad way.
Yeah, it feels like it's taking the movement backwards, and that's the last thing you want, especially out of a film that's going to be an Academy Award nominee and get attention. That's the last thing you want. So no, I totally understand that. I would love to see Dune 2 pull off a win. It would be really neat, but I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be great to see it. But I'd also, everything I've heard about Conclave has been fantastic. I really want to see it. And it feels like one of those movies that's catered to be an Academy Award Oscar bait kind of film. So maybe Conclave comes out of the woodwork and wins it. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Well, definitely for me, and this is something else, of course, I talked about in the last podcast, is how you have some voters who are voting because of the momentum of basically the push. It's
Sure.
like they go for the movie that they feel like everybody else is going to.
That everybody else is going to pick. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have those voters that are like, I'm going to go with the most obscure pick I can because I want to show people that I am a connoisseur.
Yes,
of film.
I am truly. I believe in the art, not the commerce. Yeah,
and
I get
so they'll go with the with the strange pick and sometimes that works in a movie's.
Wouldn't it be amazing if the Substance won? That would be just incredible if it pulled off the win.
Oh yeah. Well, and the thing is, I love seeing horror movies get nominated because the fact that this movie is serious body horror.
Yeah.
And it's a really harsh.
Very Cronenbergish, I've been told. So, yeah.
Yes, very much so. And so it would be a dark horse candidate. And it would be interesting to see that. Like you say, Villeneuve did get snubbed, which makes
I still don't get that. That movie, and I have issues with the film, but when you look at that movie, every aspect of that film, how can you say he didn't direct his ass? Every aspect of that movie. He is all over that film. And it looks and feels unlike anything that science fiction has brought to us in a Hollywood situation since, the first one. It's such an original piece in that way, and that it's not dumbed down. It's not, pew, pew, pew. There are battles, don't get me wrong, but it's way more drama than it is action. And there's so much going on. There's so much great world building. There's so much great production design. But Villeneuve is behind all of that. And he developed the cast. He worked with the production team. He is all over that film. I know that for a fact, even with the screenplay. How on earth he doesn't get the nomination for this, even though he did for part one? And this is arguably a much bigger picture. There's a lot more going on, and he absolutely stuck the landing. To not get that nomination is just absurd to me.
Oh, yeah. And especially with his being snubbed this year, of course, I see a lot of parallels between Dune and Wicked because, of course, you're dealing with something that you were afraid they were going to try to compress the whole thing down into one movie, and they didn't.
They did not.
And they give you a nice, expansive story in basically 2 movies.
Sure.
And the fact that, of course, John Chu was not nominated this year, my worry is that he won't get nominated next year. That he gets snubbed again.
Because my thought was, when he wasn't nominated this year, I thought, they're getting in the director from The Substance, which is great because she deserves that spot.
Sure.
And they'll get him next year when part 2 drops.
Yeah.
And if part 2 does very well, it makes all the money, you would think he would get nominated. But Villeneuve's snub this year proves that's not necessarily the case.
Exactly.
So I honestly don't know.
But then again, that's the thing about the Oscars. You really don't know now.
And ultimately, in the end, do you really even care anymore? Like, it just feels like nobody really cares about the Oscars like they used to. It doesn't have the clout that it used to have. And a lot of it is because of, like, the Emily Perez nomination boosts and things like that. Like, they wouldn't know a good film if it bit them in the ass. You know, like, the society in general has kind of turned against the Academy in a lot of ways. They've seen their ratings go down. There's just been a lot. And I just wonder, do they even really matter anymore? I mean, it's nice to say you've won an Academy Award, sure, but in the end, it doesn't seem like it really affects box office like it used to. People aren't as anticipatory about it like they used to be. I know I'm not as super geeked about it as I used to be. God, in like the 80s and 90s, I didn't miss a single telecast. But I just haven't had the necessity to watch it as much anymore. I just kind of wait and see what the highlights are and see who won. I just don't have the urge anymore to watch it.
I certainly feel the same way. Again, Wicked gets a bunch of nominations. I'm kind of hoping they get costume design. I really do hope they get sound design, just for the technical level of recording people live.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that is a very great accomplishment when you look at it. Absolutely. But I hate to say it, like, usually that's where your films like Dune and things like that, that's where they get their big wins, is in all the technical side.
Exactly.
I mean, visual effects, it's going to be up for it. It's up for best sound. I mean, like, best cinematography. Like, that's where a film like that's going to get the chance to shine. Now, Wicked, I mean, obviously, if anybody does their research on the sound, you will really, like you said, you'll appreciate just, again, how good it is when you realized it was all recorded on set. Like, that's a major feat.
Yeah.
Because everything has to be right.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot riding on that. That's a risky endeavor.
Yeah, and good example of that, of course, is Cynthia Erivo. She has a microphone hidden in her hat, but when she's not wearing her hat, they have to cut to another microphone hidden into her clothes. Mm-hmm. And once she puts her hat on, and she's sometimes singing when she does that, they do the switch over.
Yep.
And it has to be, again,
perfect.
smooth.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, on a technical side, it's amazing. But like you say, the Oscars aren't a big deal anymore. Now, for me, I was interested in some of the nominations because of Moana 2. Wicked didn't get a showing in IMAX as long as they would have. They were basically out within like a week and a half.
Yeah.
My hope really is that because it was nominated, the possibility of them getting another IMAX release. A lot of movies get like a second chance in theaters because of that. I would love to see that movie in IMAX just because of how gorgeous that it is, and that interests me.
Sure.
But I do feel like the Oscars were a marketing event that they're just not anymore.
They're not anymore. No, it's just not.
Which, the truth is, in Hollywood, there's nothing reliable marketing-wise anymore. I mean, stars used to make movies. They don't anymore. Stars not going to guarantee you're going to... The Oscars were really like the last big marketing push tool that they had.
Yeah, it was like the last gasp of old Hollywood, and now it's just like, you know what? I'll just put it this way: like, you will get more traction out of a TikTok influencer supporting your film than you will an Oscar at this stage in the game.
Yes,
like, that's the God's honest truth. That's not me being silly or flippant. That is the God's honest truth. Look at how many TikTok reels you've seen of girls doing various pieces from Wicked, right?
Yeah,
tons. That is far more important for the success of that film than any Oscar it could possibly win.
Yeah. And the truth is, Hollywood, those poor old dried white bastards do not know anything at all about how to make that work for them. Perfect example, Morbius. It's Morbin time.
It's Morbin time.
Oh my God, it's become a viral. And so they put
the kids on the TikToks really like this movie. Let's put it back out in theaters. Yeah, no, it's absolutely wrong. They did not understand the joke.
And then, of course, with Barbieheimer was a big thing. And so they tried to
that originated on social media when people made the hashtag Barbenheimer. Like, that took off. It's amazing how that took off.
Yeah. And so they tried to do it again with Gladiator 2 and Wicked.
Yep.
Which, of course, it didn't work because it wasn't at all organic.
No. It was forced. And those are also two very... I'm not saying that Barbie and Oppenheimer had a lot in common, but I'm just saying, like, when you look at Gladiator and Wicked, I mean, like, one movie, okay, Oppenheimer is PG-13. You could feasibly take a kid to see that movie if they really had a strong interest in it, right? Not the same with Gladiator 2. That's a rated R film. And it's just kind of like, that doesn't mix. It just really doesn't mix.
Well, I mean, Of course, the whole Barbieheimer thing, what made it work was that it was so ridiculous.
Right. And then the stars of the films even got behind it on social media. And again, on social media, that's where it all took off. Now, like if they'd have had like Denzel Washington going to get his ticket for Wicked, at the same time Cynthia Erivo was going to get her ticket for Gladiator too, like that's something they could have worked with. But no, they tried to force it. And when you try to force things on social media, especially when you're, a Hollywood studio trying to force those things, like you just don't get it. It feels false. And if it feels false, it will not take off. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And you have studios now who are trying to figure out how to make this work. And of course, they
still haven't. Yeah.
They haven't. And then, you have the CEO of Sony who's, they have just basically at this point given up on this Spider-Man-less universe.
Thank God.
Because, it just did not work out.
They've literally failed, like with the exception of Venom. But even the third one tanked, compared to the other two, especially. With those being the only two successes, everything else has tanked.
Yeah. But then you have the CEO of Sony blaming the audience for that.
Yeah, no.
It's like, that's,
who had an interest in Madam Web, like being connected to, that's why that film failed. Not because it had female leads or anything they tried to play, it's woke, blah, blah. No, just nobody had an interest in that character outside of Spider-Man. Like when she's connected to Spider-Man, that character has meaning. That character has history. Just on her own with some film that feels like nothing. If you didn't know it was about Madam Web, you wouldn't know it was about Madam Web because there's no look or feel of Madam Web in it. Kraven the Hunter. Kraven is a Spider-Man villain. He's really great when he's fighting Spider-Man. But that's really all you've got. He's not meant to be some anti-hero. You're not trying to Snake Plissken this guy. That doesn't work. It's like they just were making these films because if they made them, they got to keep the rights, which is basically what it feels like they were doing.
Yeah.
They had people in charge who had no idea what the hell they were doing. And the sad thing is, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson could have been a great Kraven in a film with Tom Holland Spider-Man. Yeah, that could have been awesome. But on his own in some film that has no real connection to anything in the Spider-Man universe, like nobody needs that. It's not necessary. There's not enough of history about Kraven himself that would justify trying to make a tentpole big budget film. Kraven's great in the Sinister Six when he's one of many. He's great fighting Spider-Man when he's, again, a foil for our main hero. He's not meant to be doing his own thing. It just makes no sense.
Yeah, and the marketing was so screwed up because they were bragging about how it was R-rated.
Yeah, that was a big selling point. Yeah.
Yeah, because of how violent and bloody it was. It's like, and they did that because they're like, hey, you like R-rated superhero movies
like
Deadpool and
right?
Wolverine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't understand. It's not the same thing.
It's not at all. That is apples and oranges at the finest extreme.
And yes, Deadpool Wolverine was violent, but that's not why people went to see it.
No, it's not at all. And the rated R is more for the language, and that's what they're going for is the characters and the dialogue. It's the violence is so over the top that it's part of the comedy. They're going for the comedy. They're not going for the blood and guts. That just happens to accentuate the humor. Gore hounds aren't seeking out Deadpool and Wolverine and being like, yeah, let's go watch all the gore. Nope. They're going to see that movie for the comedy.
Yeah.
And to care about the characters. That's
and it. Sony couldn't really understand that. You just saw R-rated and that was it. That's all they could.
Yeah, they just need to give that up, which thankfully they have. Mercy kill right there. What they need to do is let their animation team finish up the Spider-Verse trilogy and put the bank behind that. Because those two films are fantastic. They were Academy Award nominated. They made tons of money, tons of critical acclaim. There's where it's working. And the big reason it's working is because they're not interfering with the producers and the director. They're letting them make what they wanted to make. They need to get back on the hype train of the third film and get that done.
Yeah, they certainly do. I'm starting to get the feeling we're not going to get that film.
And that'll be criminal if we don't.
Yeah.
Unless Marvel would do the smart thing and pick it up.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. There's been a lot of talk online, and I'm sure you've heard it, that Sony just needs to sell Spider-Man back to Marvel.
They absolutely do, yeah.
I just don't see that happening for a couple of reasons. One, because the amount of money...
Oh, I mean, Spider-Man, anything makes money. Yeah.
Yeah. And as much money as they've lost on these other movies, when you throw in the Spider-Man movies that they've made, and like you say, even the Spider-Verse movies, they made more money than they lost.
Oh, sure.
Ultimately.
Sure. The problem is they're not making Spider-Man films right now. They're making these films that are adjacent to Spider-Man but aren't connected really to it, and that's why they're failing.
And I think, honestly, this third Spider-Verse movie... The biggest problem they're going to run into is that these last two movies were made where they weren't treating the animators all that well.
No.
And it's not going to be as cost effective to basically pay them what you should have been paying them and treat them the way you should have been treating them in the first place. Our American economy has depended on slave labor for a while. We're starting to get to the end of that in some things like the animation and the last strike. The animators got a lot of concessions, which
They
needed.
deserve it. Yes, they needed it. Hell.
Because they were being used and abused. But that also makes these movies a hell of a lot more expensive because, I mean, the animation.
It's stunning. Yeah.
It's absolutely stunning, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that goes.
Sure.
And if you got to pay for that work, a fair wage, that can be a problem. But as of right now, it's a complete standstill, plus the fact that you have your voice lead who has kind of put himself in a weird situation right now. We've been promised a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of things to look forward to. What we've been seeing with the Superman trailer.
Oh, yeah, I'm stunned. I cannot wait to see that film. I don't know that if there's any film I'll anticipate more this year than Superman, honestly. Watching that trailer, you can tell James Gunn gets it. Like,
Yeah.
what was missing from the Snyderverse was just, well, A, an understanding of the actual character and a love of the character, more importantly.
Yeah.
But B, the hope and the joy that that character is supposed to represent, like we saw in the Donner films in 78 with Christopher Reeve. Like, Superman is supposed to be kind of like, if you think about the times that those films are made, like, he's kind of emblematic of the times, right? So the 78 Superman, Christopher Reeve, note perfect. He will always be my Superman, just like Tom Baker will always be my doctor.
Right.
But, the 70s, we're getting over Vietnam, Watergate. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension, a lot of distrust. The energy crisis is going on. And Superman comes with this feeling of escapism, much like Star Wars did the year before. There's a sense of hope, a sense of pride, a sense of connectivity, And it is just that perfect storm of director, content, music, star, everything is so perfect in that film. And it's the litmus test for pretty much every superhero film since. I mean, everybody knows when it comes to Marvel, Kevin Feige says, watch that film because that's what we want our films to feel like. Like that's it. And with this trailer, I saw so much of that. And I think what I really love is our country right now is just a weird, weird place. And a lot of us feel beaten down and hopeless right now. So I like that his trailer starts with a Superman who's defeated. He's been knocked into the ground, spitting up blood. He's broken. We're not used to seeing Superman like that ever. And so it's like, hey, America, this is how we're all kind of feeling right now. And then you hear that whistle. And I love watching reaction videos to people who don't know Superman history at all. Because they're always like, what on earth is that? Is that some big monster coming? Because you see this storm coming at him through the snow. And then there's goddamn Crypto the Superdog in all of his wonderful pupper glory with his cape, with his little dog tag S insignia. And Superman says, take me home. And it feels like in that trailer, Crypto is James Gunn telling us that, you know what? You've been missing these things in your life. Let's bring him back. And the very next shot is a shot of him saving a child. And it is, every time I watch people's reactions to it, they are just like, oh, and it was like, that's what I want to see because we never got that in the Snyderverse. When Snyder makes his films, it feels like it was made for internet trolls and chads. It's like the most uninspiring film. Like I told you when I saw it, like I've never wanted to throat punch a film so much in my life as I did Man of Steel because now at that time I was a dad. My son had seen the Donner films, and I always refer to Superman 2 as a Donner film, even though Lester's name is on it. Donner did 90% of that film. Let's just call it what it is. So he had been raised on the Christopher Reeve films, and he loved Superman. He loved the animated series and the Justice League series. Like, he was really, loving those things. And I felt so furious that there now existed a Superman film that, as a father, I did not feel comfortable taking my child to. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable. And I'll never forget, and you were with me, we took Cam when we went to see Ant-Man. Mm-hmm. And the trailer for Batman v Superman came up. And I was so interested to see what Cam was going to say because he loved Batman, he loves Superman. I'm like, oh, they're putting them together. Let's see what he says. And I'll never forget, he looks up at me and he's like 8. So this film should have been like the thing he wanted to see. And he goes, I don't think I want to see that. And I was like, why? And he's like, because Superman's not supposed to be like Batman. And I was like, if my 8-year-old kid gets it, how the hell does Zack Snyder not?
Yeah.
And so I hate the Snyderverse, and all the Snyder Bros can get mad at me, and that's fine. Your Snyderverse is dead. You somehow willed Warner Brothers to make that atrocious Justice League cut, the Snyder cut. Ugh, God, awful. Sorry, but it is. And I hate to say this, I would actually watch the Whedon cut over that cut because it's at least got a little more joy to it. That film is an absolute train wreck, and it is an absolute atrocious thing to get through. I got HBO Max during the pandemic, and I thought, well, let's just take a look. I'm watching it with my partner, Cindy, and we're both just, God, when is this going to end? Like, when just end. like, just end. And then we had the treat, and boy, let me put that in quotation fingers, of seeing Jared Leto's Joker again. God, man, it was just like, this is awful. And I don't understand people who are like, that's my Superman. It's not even Superman. How is that your Superman? He doesn't bring joy. He doesn't bring hope. He looks bored. He looks gloomy. He looks like Batman if he had Superman's suit. Yeah. And then, of course, the contrast is all cranked down, so everything looks dark. Because if you look at pictures on set of Henry Cavill in the suit, that suit's really pretty. And he looks great in it. But when it's all dialed down, it looks like almost like it's black. It's so dark. And I'm just like, there's no... Hans Zimmer does what he can with the score. It's not bad, but he does what he can. But Man of Steel and Batman v Superman are just terrible films. I genuinely hate them with the fury of 1,000 suns. And I'm not saying like every Marvel film is perfect. They're not, especially post-Endgame. It's been rough. But at least with this, it looks like Gunn is trying to right the ship. And I feel confident in him because of what he did with the Suicide Squad, where he actually like made me care about Harley Quinn again. He made me care about Ratcatcher of all characters. And then, of course, what he did with Peacemaker. Like, you took a pretty irredeemable character in the Suicide Squad and made me care about him. Like, how do you do that, sir? And that's why I think with him in charge of Superman, I feel like that film is going to give us the payoff we've been waiting for. I think it's going to be a Superman that is hopeful and joyful, a Superman who is kind and friendly, and who sees himself as one of us. And that's always been the most important thing about Superman. I've always said, for me, Superman represents the best of humanity. And you say, well, he's an alien. I'm like, well, he has alien powers, but he's a kid from Kansas. And that's where he positions himself. And that's why I think James Gunn is going to knock it out of the park.
Oh, yeah.
The universe is expanding as the film even goes. We're getting Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner, which I'm very excited about that. We're getting Hawkgirl. We're getting Mr. Terrific. Like, it looks amazing. Like, this film's going to be a blast. I genuinely cannot wait to see it.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, we've already seen Creature Commandos.
Oh, what a fun romp that was.
Oh, yeah.
You made me care about the weasel.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, I literally had tears in my eyes on that. Like, and Dr. Phosphorus, like, how are you going to make me care like that for characters that most people would think are irredeemable? But that's the whole thing, is every bad guy, could have been a good guy, but they had that one bad day. And he does a great job with that. James Gunn, you can tell he wants to bring joy back to the DC universe, because in all honesty, the DC characters are some of the most recognized and cherished characters, not just in comicdom, but in all of pop culture. I mean, Superman is as American as mom, baseball, and apple pie. Yeah. And Batman, I mean, God, who doesn't love Batman? And Wonder Woman, these are characters, if you've never picked up a comic in your life, you know who they are.
Yeah.
You know who every one of those characters are. And that is a big deal. The DC universe should be better than the Marvel universe. And now it's got a chance to really be that. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do.
Especially now with 2025, I think as far as Disney and Marvel, this is going to be a make or break for them.
It will. I'm super stoked for Daredevil Born Again. Like, I feel like that is going to just deliver. You got Charlie Cox, you got Vincent D'Onofrio back. Like, I'm in.
And you brought the rest of the gang.
And the rest of the gang's all there too. But if you bring D'Onofrio back, then I know you're serious. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's serious. And that trailer, I don't know that I've winced so much at a trailer in my life, man. There are some broken bone shots in that. Yeah. Made me hurt. That broken leg shot, I was like, God.
Where he jumps up and just...
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Like, that is going to be brutal, man.
Yeah. Well, Kevin Feige, when he was watching rushes from this, when they had the first crack at it, where they were like, well, we're going to bring in these two people, but we're not going to make this like the Netflix show. And they realized, no, this isn't going to work. No. Because people don't want that.
They don't. And I heard someone like on their team compare it now to like the Penguin. in that it's a much more darker and grittier take on the source, a little bit different, more action-oriented than The Penguin was, which The Penguin, by the way,
Was amazing.
my God in heaven, may have been the best thing in pop culture last year. Like, seriously, it was that. And if they can make Daredevil feel like it's in that kind of tone, which, I mean, the Netflix series did a great job with, if they can take that tone even further, and especially with Wilson Fisk now in the position of mayor,
Yeah.
boy, there's a lot. I mean, like, that run in the comics is pretty badass anyway. So I feel like we're going to get some great stuff there. Now, film-wise, I really am excited for Captain America: Brave New World. I really want that film to work. The trailers give me big Winter Soldier energy. And of course, as you know, that's my favorite of all the Marvel films, maybe my favorite comic film of all time. So if they can bring that kind of energy to that film, I think it can be really great. It's got a hell of a cast. You can't complain about any of the cast. They're fantastic. So if that film, you know, if it's just modestly successful, like, that's a win. Because a lot of people are like, well, that's not Captain America. It's not Captain America. It's not Steve Rogers. I'm like, well, it is actually Captain America, because even in the comics, he becomes Captain America. So deal with that. But, you know, I feel like if the film works, I mean, you got Harrison Ford filling in for the Thunderbolt Ross's role. And I mean, like, that's great casting. I'm very excited about that. Everything I'm seeing for that film makes me pretty geeked, not going to lie. Now, Thunderbolts looks magical. Like, I think Thunderbolts is going to be spectacular. I'm super excited about that one.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to Captain America. I know some people are worried because it is the shortest of the Captain America films. But to my mind, if you're doing a shorter film because you cutting the fat, you're having good pacing, it's an action film.
You want pacing. It's
you
important.
know, I don't think every movie has to be 2 hours long.
No, as a matter of fact, that was standard for the longest time. Like,
Yeah.
I'm okay if it comes in under 2 hours, but it's all killer, no filler.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm absolutely
good.
for that.
I'm totally fine with that.
And especially after seeing the last season of What If.
Yeah.
And seeing the one episode specifically with the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And if we can get more of that kind of a dynamic in Thunderbolts.
Oh, and Thunderbolts, yeah, God.
Yeah,
that
I'm
ought to be
definitely,
spectacular.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. But yeah, I think 2025 is going to be, for Marvel, this is a make or break for them. So
I don't disagree with that. Now, they had last year, they did give us the wonderful Agatha All Along.
yes.
Thoroughly enjoyed that show. Like, man, that was spectacular. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and it didn't shit the bed. It stuck the landing. It was a solid show. What If season 3 was a little rough, but it had some really great moments.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the Shang-Chi Western episode. Thought that one was magical.
Oh, yeah.
That was great. And I did love, of course, the Winter Soldier and Red Guardian episode. That one was fantastic. You know, like I said, there were good things there overall. But for me, I'm with you. It definitely feels like they've got to get their mojo back.
Yeah.
And in a year where Superman is coming, boy, you really need to get your mojo back.
And I think this is a problem across Hollywood, and it's definitely something that we've been talking about on this podcast, is that Hollywood they don't have like a set formula or set of, you know, tools that they can promote a movie and make it good. It's almost like they've never made movies before.
Yeah, it's really
they
weird.
Don't know. They're not sure how things work anymore. And they have realized that you're not going to be able, no matter how good television is, no matter how good the stuff is on Max or Disney Plus, until you get people up and out and into the theaters, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good.
Well, and the problem is the stuff that's on these streaming services is so cinematic in the way that it's made and the way that it's shot and the way that it's edited and put together. I mean, I'm watching stuff on my TV and I'm watching it in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos.
Yeah.
At home on a streaming service. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's better than some of my local theaters. So they've got to figure out, one of the biggest things I think Hollywood's biggest issue is that everything they do now has to fit the formula of, can it be created into an IP? And not everything needs to have a sequel. Not everything needs to be an established IP. The Academy Award winner from just a few years ago, Everything Everywhere All at Once. No IP, brilliant film. Better multiverse film than the Marvel multiverse film. That was based off established IP and was continuing a complete full-blown franchise. The better film of the two by far. And it was an original piece, and it was so much fun. And I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that we need. Like, A24, thank God. I mean, I may not like everything they put out, but at least they're giving directors a chance to put things out. When back in the day, I mean, in the 80s, God, it felt like anybody could get a movie made. Even if it just went like direct to video or something, but people were getting movies. They were getting them made. They were getting out there. You had way more distributors too. I mean, you had Canon and New World and the Corman stuff, you know, Troma. You had all of these different people just putting stuff out. And it was great because you could constantly find something new. You could find new voices. New people could be discovered. And now it just feels, man, I mean, if it's not an established IP that's guaranteed to make $250 million, you know, opening weekend kind of shit, they don't care.
Yeah.
And that is killing us because you think about the climate now, like where would a lot of the big, you know, the great films that came out like in the 70s and 80s, they may not have ever even been made in the current climate.
Oh, yeah.
And that's crazy to think that.
Well, you would never see a Star Wars. Forget about it.
It wouldn't have had the chance. Hell
It
no.
would have never had. And like you mentioned, A24, at least they're willing to put stuff out like
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Right, exactly.
Although I can't say this for sure, but I just have this feeling that if you ask the average Hollywood producer why Everything Everywhere All at Once was successful, they couldn't tell you.
Oh, they wouldn't have a clue.
They
wouldn't
don't
have a
know.
clue.
And, you know, A24 are getting ready to put out a movie about a father and a daughter going on vacation and hitting a unicorn on the road.
Yeah, and that unicorn is really mean. So, yeah, like there's that.
And is possibly the cure for cancer.
Yeah.
Who would take a chance on that?
No one.
Besides A24.
Besides A24, no one.
Nobody would. And you need to start taking some chances. I mean, they're not always going to pay off for you, but it's like you say, if you get fixated on IP,
you're going to miss the forest for the trees, man. There's so many great films that could get made that won't get made. It's sad that, you know, directors, you know, before he passed, like David Lynch, you know, he had trouble getting studios to let him do stuff because, well, it's not going to be a big moneymaker. It's not going to, you know, guarantee, you know, $150 million in the box office stuff. But that shouldn't be the point. The point is to give directors a chance to have their voices heard, to show that you support the genuine art of cinema, not just the commerce.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem is like, people are picking up on that and they're not wanting to go to the theater as much because hell, the theater, God, for a family of 4, good luck getting out of there without spending $100 for one film.
Yeah.
Now, how many films are going to go to multiple films in a week or a weekend or even a month if it costs that much to go? Yeah. There's just so many things that have to get figured out with the Hollywood studio system, including the distribution system. There are so many things that have to get figured out. I mean, we're at a point now where people are going to the movie theater to get designer popcorn boxes.
Yeah.
They're paying $30 for a popcorn box that looks like or a drink box that looks like the hat from Wicked or looks like the hammer from the Lord of the Rings film. And I'm like, that's cool as a nerd.
Or the casket from Nosferatu.
Or the casket from Nosferatu. I mean, I won't lie. I do have the ghost trap from Frozen Empire. But I didn't have a ghost trap. I needed one, so that worked out well.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just saying that's where we're at now. Like they're trying to find ways to get into the theater with things like that. And people are paying $25, $35 for what is in essence a popcorn bucket.
Oh yeah.
Like it's crazy. Like it's just so weird right now. Like I miss like dollar cinemas and stuff, man. Like I remember when the cinema was open down in Huntington, that was the first place doing the flashback stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you and I got to go to that double feature of Enter the Dragon and The Warriors.
Yeah.
And it was like $5. And they had the old school like popcorn and drinks and everything was like $1. And I was like, this is great. This is what it should be. Like, not everything has to be, you know, Dolby Atmos and perfect digital projection. Sometimes I just like sitting in a movie theater and watching a movie. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know? And there's that feeling, that joy of that. And it's the closest experience I've had to that lately is the little movie theater, the Flora Lee Theater there in Charleston.
Yeah.
I got to go watch Assault on Precinct 13.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting in the theater. It's not a big theater, but I paid $1 for my drink, like $2 for my popcorn, and I sat and had a great time watching a fantastic film. Was it the Blu-ray that I have at home? Yes. That's not the point. The point was being in a cinema setting with other people who love this film or were just discovering it for the first time and being able to have a pop and a popcorn, and I spent $10 for the whole thing. Like it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that was the theater where I saw Parasite.
Oh wow, what a cool place! And next month I'm going to try to hit. They're showing Mulholland Drive and David Lynch. I really want to see that.
But you know, I think ultimately Hollywood needs to figure out that you don't have to throw a ton of money at a movie to make, because Parasite or Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Dude, that film had like they had 3 people working on special, or 5 people on their special effects team, and they learned how to do it from watching YouTube videos.
Yeah,
they weren't spending a ton of money on special effects.
Yeah.
But they won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects.
Yeah.
That's insane. And it didn't cost anything.
Yeah, Godzilla -1.
Right, man.
The amount of money that they, you know.
it was like a drop in the bucket compared to what the legendary Godzilla films are, which I love those movies, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But Godzilla Minus One was a spectacular film that literally was made for under $20 million when it's all said and done. That's insane. Hollywood wouldn't know what to do with that. They wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately what it comes down to is the piece of the puzzle that Hollywood is missing, in my opinion, is they spend so much time with trying to figure out what stars are going to sell a movie, what kind of advertising, how do we go viral, how do we throw a lot of money at this.
Yeah.
And what's true now has been true since Aristotle. Story is king.
It is.
There is no question it's ever been asked about a movie, how do we make this movie good, that story does not answer.
Sure.
They need to get back to story.
It's critical. It really is. And like, that's one of the things that I'm with you. Like, a great screenplay, can really make or break a film. You can have the best actors, the most expensive Hollywood stars in the world, and put them in a movie, and it doesn't mean the film's going to be good. If there's no story for them to be able to relate to, if there's no good story driving the narrative of this film, then what's the point? It's what it really comes down to, is what is the point? It's infuriating. Think about it this way. Would Tarantino have a chance to make films in the climate today? Probably not. Because they're like, well, he's making these movies based off the 1970s. Who's going to go see that? What kid's going to go see that film? Like, what? No, he wouldn't get a chance to make anything today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane when you think about that.
Yeah, because the truth is, and I mean, we all know this, I guarantee you, there are filmmakers that could be putting out some really great stuff, and they'll never get the chance to do so.
It's criminal. Thank God for things like YouTube and streaming services where they can get that chance.
Yeah.
And it's like Hollywood wonders why they're losing so much to TikTok and YouTube. Well, because people are getting a chance to be creative there. And you know what they're also doing? They're listening to what people want to see, and they're bringing that to them.
Yeah.
Fan films nowadays, hell, I've seen fan films that look like they came out of Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Because the technology now is
my God, it's there.
so good.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that you're seeing who are getting some chances to do films, of course, they started out making these small films.
Absolutely. We're making commercials or whatever, like it's insane.
Yeah. It's just a matter of ultimately what it comes down to, story is king.
Sure.
Story has always been king. And until Hollywood figures it out, they're going to keep having the problems that they're having.
Yeah, you just want to take every Hollywood exec and just be like, just go watch Chinatown.
Yeah.
Most people will say it's maybe the perfect screenplay. Watch that film. It's a brilliant film. That's how you make a movie.
Yeah.
And it all starts with Robert Towne's brilliant screenplay. That's where it all starts.
Yeah.
And if you look at that film, analyze that, that's the kind of shit you need to be making right there.
Absolutely. And I don't know if Hollywood is going to learn that lesson. I don't know how many lumps they're going to have to take before they do, but
I don't know. I mean, 2025 has some promising stuff coming out. I'm excited, as with anything, I'm always excited to see what new stuff will come out. What's the new thing I'll be super excited about? I know Superman will be my biggest thing this year. I've needed a good Superman film to wash the taste out of Man of Steel out of my mouth, because it still sits in the back of my throat and I'm still wanting to hawk it up. So I'm really looking forward to what James Gunn will do, and what he'll do with, the fact that he listened to the fan base, and now Jason Momoa finally gets to be Lobo.
Yes.
Which we've all been screaming that since we first ever saw Jason Momoa. It's, damn, that dude looks like Lobo. He should be Lobo. And James Gunn's like, you know what? He should be Lobo. Let's put him in Supergirl. Let's see how it plays. And I'm really excited about Supergirl. Shit, this is awesome. What a great time. And I love that he's even said a lot of his inspiration for his current take on the DC universe is the 90s animated universe, which most people will say is the gold standard of all things DC. So that's a great place to take inspiration from when you're developing a new film franchise. So I'm very excited to see where that goes. But, James Gunn, again, he would also tell you it starts with the screenplay.
Oh, yeah.
It absolutely is critical. And I think, that's the most important thing, is the storytelling. He's a really good storyteller. So I think that's why his films will work. We'll see. We'll see. I already just feel like 2025 is already off to a bad start, though, because we lost David Lynch. And it feels like the world's just gone to hell since we lost David Lynch. I'm currently working with some other friends on a bi-weekly review of they call it the Director Series, and we're talking about David Lynch. And so right now we're into Twin Peaks: The Return. And we did a special episode for him when we found out he passed, because never in my mind did I think, when we were doing this journey, that it would ever be, we'd be discussing it posthumously. And now that's where we are. And that hurts. I literally shed tears. David Lynch is who made me understand that film, the way I say it is that he made me understand that I don't always have to understand a movie. Sometimes you just got to feel it.
Yeah.
And he was the absolute king of that. I may not understand every film he's ever made, but man, I feel something when I watch them.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many filmmakers that I cannot say that about. But him, I always could. David Lynch is who taught my little 9-year-old brain that science fiction does not have to be Star Wars. When I first saw Dune, I didn't fully understand what all was going on, and I felt uncomfortable with some of it, but I watched it every single time I could. I became obsessed with it, and that's really what started my love for all things David Lynch. And then, of course, Twin Peaks, and it all goes from there. But what a voice. What a voice. He is one of those directors that you can genuinely look at and say, that man was an artist. He was an absolute artist. And the art of cinema took a massive blow in his. It was bad enough that he had emphysema because he was already working on a project with Netflix, and then COVID and his emphysema hit, and there was just, he couldn't even leave the house.
Yeah.
And how ironic that when the fires hit in Los Angeles, shortly after that, he passes.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like that Los Angeles isn't there anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And there's something kind of poetic about that. But, you know, for me, Lynch will always be in my top 5 directors of all time because he made me appreciate other layers of cinema. Like, if not for him, I don't really start looking at Kubrick films. And, you know, I don't start looking at like a whole bunch, honestly. There's a whole bunch of films I don't even look at if not for David Lynch. And even television, like he changed the landscape of television with Twin Peaks. There's no X-Files. There's no Breaking Bad. There's no any of the shows that you love, like Lost. None of that exists if Twin Peaks doesn't work. And I don't think he ever gets enough credit for that. He and Mark Frost both don't get enough credit for that. I'm glad that the last thing he really did, though, was The Return. It's like an 18-hour film, and it's all uncut, unfiltered David Lynch. It's brilliant. But it's just, he's one of those people that when I got the news that day, like, it gutted me, man. Like, it really did. It just, I felt that loss. There are certain people, even though I've never met them, I will feel that loss when they're gone. He was one of them. Steven Spielberg and John Williams are two that I will mourn when they're gone. And David Lynch is one that I have as well. So, you know, to all you listening, if you've never really gotten into David Lynch, now's a great time to do it. I would recommend Twin Peaks is a pretty good entryway because it's weird, but not too weird. It'll set things up for you. But he's one of those directors that, for me, you know, even if I didn't fully comprehend or understand what I was watching, I knew I was watching something special.
Yeah.
Almost any film of his, you could take any frame of that film and just frame it.
Mm-hmm.
The man really knew how to make a movie. Many people will say Mulholland Drive is perhaps the best film of this generation. Definitely the best film of the 2000s. I can't disagree. It's a brilliant film. My favorite will always be Lost Highway, but Mulholland Drive is just an amazing dream of a film.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those movies that he got the recognition for that he deserved, the Academy Award nominations and all that. And I am glad that he did get his Lifetime Achievement Award from the Oscars before he passed. Because if anyone deserved to have an Oscar on a shelf, it was David Lynch.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Yeah, he's definitely going to be missed. So, as we're wrapping up, you did mention podcast. So I did want to ask you before you go to let everyone know, let the Geek Watchers know where they can find you online. If you have an address for that podcast and anything else.
It's Video Store Rejects on YouTube. And again, we don't have any like fancy bells and whistles. It's just the 3 screens and that's it. But if you like getting into a deep dive about film, that's what we do. So right now, the director series, the first one we ever did was David Lynch. So we went through the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks. And then I told people, I was like, you know, I was telling the guys I'm working with, I'm like, I think we need to take a little detour before we go into The Return, because David Lynch as a director when he did The Return was a very different David Lynch from in 1990 and 1991. So I said, we need to take a detour and we need to watch Wild at Heart.
Mm-hmm.
We need to watch Lost Highway. And we need to watch Mulholland Drive. And then we need to watch Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me and The Missing Pieces, and then go into The Return. And when we got through with it, they were like, you know what, Kevin, that was the right call, because like it prepares you more going into The Return, because The Return is uncut, unfiltered David Lynch at that stage in his career, David Lynch. Not David Lynch when he's still trying to kind of be a little kind to the studios to not go too far. It worked out really well. So
and you don't want to start with Eraserhead because that's
way too out there. And it's an amazing film, and I still don't understand everything about it. I don't understand every single bit of symbolism, but I get the basic gist of it. But that's okay. I don't have to. And as we say on our podcast, however you interpret a Lynch film, that's correct. You're not wrong, because he very much left things open. He did not want to tell you exactly what something meant. And he appreciated that you bring yourself into a film. You bring your experiences, your past, the things that you've dealt with. Those things all come with you when you watch any of his films. And so your interpretation, it's correct. And I love that. You can talk to two different people about the same Lynch film, and they might come out with two different, completely polar opposite concepts, but they're both right. Mm-hmm. And there's something very, like, we don't see that kind of filmmaking anymore.
No,
you just
certainly don't. Okay, but that gives you something to think about. But I did want to thank you for coming out today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun.
I'm sad Mandy couldn't be here, but I'm happy to fill in whenever I can. And, it's always great to talk shop.
Yeah.
The geek have inherited the earth, so let's stop eating each other and enjoy it.
Yes. And with that said, we come to the end of episode 240. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petry, who's not here, and for friend of the show, Kevin Pauley, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.